I was very flattered to hear that I was sort of a reference for some of the initial music stylings that were being thrown around, music that I'd done for the Command & Conquer games and things like that.
It was a tremendous honor to work on this project with the team that we had put together, and especially working with Frank. I grew up playing all those old Westwood games, so getting to actually work with Frank on Tempest Rising was an absolutely mind-blowing trip.
Originally got involved with Tempest Rising, sort of started off as a social media conversation.
I actually met Frank all the way back in 2011 for the first time. I was visiting the US for the first time, and one of my dreams was to meet Frank Klepacki. So I went to Vegas, got to meet Frank in his studio, signed a few soundtracks of mine from some of the past games that he worked on. It was a huge experience. And then we actually caught up at Gamescom a couple of years ago. And at that event, we had just revealed Tempest Rising. And of course, we talked about maybe we should collaborate. Maybe this is the time.
I had kind of gotten wind that Tempest Rising was a game that was being developed. There were some comments that went back and forth. That sort of kicked off the conversation of possibly getting me on board to be involved. And so, it just kind of took off from there.
Sounds like your sort of challenge, eh, Commander?
The approach was actually a little bit more directional than you might think. So Frank has decades and decades of experience. He worked in almost every genre imaginable. But for Tempest Rising, we already had a sound that we developed with fantastic composer Michael Markey, who essentially established the sound of Tempest Rising, which is not the sound of classic Frank Klepacki. It's kind of an evolution of that.
The original Command & Conquer games, in which we all take tremendous inspiration from, had an incredibly diverse soundtrack. And I felt like having a number of different composers on the team would have been something really good for driving towards that goal and getting all these different sounds and feelings that different composers can bring.
For this type of game and just the history of this type of games, we first of all need banging heavy tunes. It just really fits this type of gameplay, and it's kind of also what most people expect.
I was encouraged to just be me and bring what I bring to the project, but with respect to what was already done, I wanted to make sure that what I was doing was going to fit in as well, and that way it would be a nice blend stylistically, but also to complement the other music that's in the game too.
The time to strike is now. You will be my sword.
My vision for the music of Tempest Rising was basically everything needed to come down to the concept of power. RTS games are all about two or more factions or groups kind of vying for power over something. It might be a little bit nebulous or difficult to try to convey the concept of power through music, but I feel like it's certainly possible to give the feeling across.
What we want the players to feel is that grand scale of epic battle simulator. You want to be in the helicopter and being the commander and seeing the entire battlefield unfold.
You are the commander, so whatever the units say to you makes you feel like you're in power. Marquis select a bunch of units, tell them to go there. They're like, yes sir, you got it. Like, those barks are part of it. It's one of the coolest and most fun things about RTS games.
Yes, Commander. Moving out.
But the best thing is when you play that favorite track that builds up, and right as it hits its climax, you're attacking the enemy base and everything blows up, and you hear the heavy metal By Our Blood starts playing, and you feel the goosebumps. That's the other part of it, this connection between the music of the game, what you do as a player, and of course what the units tell you. It feels really, really good. You feel like you're in power when you play the game.
I think music can convey power and make you feel powerful based on your instrument choices and based on the way that you use those together. Mixing is important too. You've got to allow things to have some dynamic range so that they punch you a little harder sometimes.
We want to really hammer home that you're in a battle now and big explosions are going off and the music is epic, etc. But then you're building and there's a lull in combat, and you want to kind of strategize and relax, and you want the dynamics to reflect that. So you hear rhythm of the ambience from the buildings, etc.
A very ambient soundscape, something that makes you feel immersed in this whole world and history that Tempest Rising is.
For example, I was using a lot of tribal drums mixed with gritty synth pads, but still retaining a melody and still giving some hard hits every now and again to kind of amplify it a little bit of that feeling so that it gives you that tension. You don't feel like you're just at ease for this amount of time. It's like, okay, it's a little at ease here, but there could be something that's going to happen. You don't know. You might have neglected something and now you're going to pay for it later. You know, these are the kinds of things that can get away from you in a real-time strategy game. So, you know, I always keep that kind of thing in mind too.
The tone of the game is reflected in the music by the style of music that we picked. First of all, we started again by creating these hero tracks. Let's get the foundation of each sound for each faction locked down. You might not know when you hear it because they're not named anything Dynasty, GDF, Veti, but it is a soundtrack full of Dynasty tracks, GDF tracks, and Veti tracks. And then based on that, we had our composers create tracks that would fit the story and themes of the game.
You know, what is the soundtrack of war if not, going back to our earliest days, the sound of marching and beating drums, and percussion is the heart of it. And I think that bringing the elements of electronic percussion as well as melding it with more acoustic percussion elements as well, like we've sort of achieved a nice sense of harmony between the fighting between troops, you know, flesh and blood, guns in their hands, as well as all these like sort of outlandish vehicles and sci-fi weaponry that is available to you in the game.
Initially, we had talked about what would constitute sort of a main theme that ties the game together, and that theme was called Conclave. It was sort of a theme where I directly took inspiration from the other tracks that were associated with some of the different factions of the game, and I wanted to find a way to homage some melody from that all into one theme. And it definitely had a bit of kind of Tiberian Sun influence, just in terms of the concept of going from something heavy into something synthesized and more ambient, and then keeping the groove going throughout that, having that sort of variety in place.
Any challenging parts to create was definitely explosions and weapon sounds. Being in Denmark, not being able to record any of that is very, very challenging. So we have to get very creative with recording stuff that's not explosions and make it sound like it is an explosion. We use a lot of doors, old rusty slamming doors for explosions and gunshots and all of that stuff. It's very fun and it's very rewarding, but it's also very hard.
Bear with me. The information is still coming in.
When experiencing the soundscape of Tempest Rising, I really hope that players can experience like all the facets and tones and emotions that sort of come about within such a dynamic genre like an action-focused RTS game. Those like moments where it synergizes in the sort of intentional way, but then also when things happen unintentionally, like the music gets really quiet and then there is a big fight happening, and then you're just left to hear all these explosions and soldier screaming sounds because the music is no longer pushing its way to the front. I really hope that players can experience like how dynamically everything can interact with itself.
Hopefully they will feel nostalgic. And I don't think they'll feel nostalgic because the music sounds like it sounded 10, 20 years ago. I think they'll feel nostalgic because of the type of music we decided to make for this game. Most of us can't remember modern scores of movies anymore because they are downgraded to something that's kind of like background. It's more about letting the viewer know about a certain mood. What we've done is the opposite. We decided to make actual full tracks. It builds up, there's a climax, there's like almost choruses and verses and everything you expect from a real piece of music track that you hear on the radio or on a soundtrack, which is very atypical for modern games, but it works really well if you loved that type of music from back in the 90s.
Going into this for me, my hope for this game actually was that it would reinvigorate the genre, you know, remind people of where it came from and show where it can go. I was personally excited about that myself. I hope when people play it and hear my tracks alongside everything else that it brings them back to that feeling, you know, what it felt like for them to play their first RTS, hear my music for the first time, and know that that is now a part of what's happening today. And I think everybody's pretty proud of, you know, the work they've done, and I can say the same for myself. So I'm really stoked to hear what people think when they have a chance to play it.